And I'll turn us over to Jon Taylor. It's all yours, Jon.
Welcome, everybody. Good to see some familiar names, I think, maybe. Can't tell how familiar you are when it's just text. I'm happy to be here again. And today, what I wanted to talk about, this might be a bit of a bummer for those of you who are, in the immediate throes of, just having discovered infidelity, addiction, or just going through that disclosure process. Because what I'm going to talk about today, I think often this issue, it gets pegged on, this is because you're an addict, or this is because you're in trauma. But this can be its own standalone thing. In fact, when I'm working with couples, there's a lot of things that I watch for, not because they're pathological, meaning they're problems that have to be fixed, but because differences between two people, if unaccounted for, if unknown, they can cause a lot of big problems. So we may do a bit of a series on this. There's nothing wrong with you, but this hurts your relationship type of a stuff. So we'll talk about, the technical term for it is arousal differences, or differences in arousal bias. But because of the group that we work with here and what arousal tends to mean in the circles we run in, think about it as like differences in alertness or energetic levels. So just kind of where your nervous system hums at all times. Like I said before, there are a lot of aspects of relationships that are problematic but not pathological. And I think it's important to know the difference, because pathological things like addiction or cheating on your partner, they ought to be addressed from the standpoint of ultimately you have to knock this off. Because things that are harmful and come from, a broken, wounded place, I'm a big believer in there ought to be healing where there can be. Things like energetic level differences or alertness differences, those don't come from a broken place always. In fact, most of the time they don't. We're all built a little bit differently, and you can see this with newborn infants. They say that with newborn infants, the precursor to personality is something they call temperament. And there's two types of main temperaments. You'll see reactive children, and you'll see, I don't think the term is non-reactive or like less reactive children. So one of the ways they test this is you pick up baby's foot or baby's arm and you drop it. And the baby that startles like this, they say that's high reactivity. And that can be correlated with more like anxious personality traits, even more depressive personality traits. Interestingly enough, the highly reactive babies tend to be the more introverted adults. So that's interesting when you look at introversion from the angle of it's like the shell I put on to protect my sensitivity. The less reactive babies tend to have more extroverted, high energy personality traits. So the reason why I want to talk about these differences here is because I think a lot of the couples that I work with, they can put a lot of hopes for all of their relationship problems, or many of their relationship problems, being solved once they get through this addiction thing. And I'm not trying to be John the prophet of doom by saying it's not all about addiction, because actually being able to parse some of this stuff out, there's wins you can have early on in your relationship healing because it doesn't have anything to do with addiction. Because there are things you can learn about each other and know about each other and handle one another differently, that don't have to do with trust. They don't have to do with building confidence in each other, or knowing you want to stay together. Again, most of what I try to bring to these webinars is stuff that can help you in every kind of relationship. So let's get into talking about what arousal bias differences or what energy level differences mean. To keep it simple, we'll say there's two main divisions. You can have people that ride high. Stan Tatkin uses the term airplanes. These are people that tend to be more on the alert side, more high energy. They may do a little bit better. They may be able to metabolize intensity a little bit better. They might have more of that like hyperactive feel where they're always kind of go, go, go. They may have a thinner skin up there in the higher energy bias. They may get more upset easily, hair trigger type of stuff, that exaggerated startle response type of stuff. That would be more natural for the people who ride up here. The other division are the people who ride down low. And if you imagine like a baseline in between, these would be more like submarines, like Stan Tapkin talks about. These are people whose nervous systems just move slower. Think about the sloth from, what's that Disney movie, Zootopia, the DMV sloth. He's a submarine. It's not that he's not with it, he's just on a different timeline, he's on a different wavelength. Submarines may appear less reactive. Some of that could be because of one of the ways that submarines manage high arousal situations. They tend to be a little more avoidant. And again, that's not pathological. Think in terms of, if you just hear sounds louder than everybody else, you'll be sensitive to loud noises. They tend to be a little slower in their responses, maybe a little less animated in the face. They may like the rest and digest position better than the go, go, go position. So I'm sure as you're listening to this, you may be thinking about maybe your energetic style bias and your partner style bias. And you may notice that you and your partner are quite different, and there's problems that come out of that. Or you may notice you and your partner are very, very similar, and there's problems that come out of that. So let's talk about some of the combinations, the permutations you can get here, and some of the problems you might see. So we'll go with the classic opposites attract. You have an airplane and a submarine together. When I'm working with couples, the biggest indication to me that we might have an arousal bias difference, an energy level bias difference, is when this couple struggles with transitions. So when they come home together, when they go to bed together, when it's time to shift to the next task, that's when fights break out. That's when they're wary of each other. So, for obvious reasons, the airplane running up here is going to feel like their submarine partner doesn't care, is not invested, is not interested. And the submarine partner is often going to feel like their airplane partner is too much. And you can fill in the blanks on what the fights sound like there. Or you can get a couple where there's two airplanes. And I've had this before. And one of the indications to that is when they fight, they scream at each other. And as I watch them screaming at each other in my office, nobody seems to be hurt. Nobody seems to be upset by by the volume that their partner is speaking with. They may be upset by what's said, but they're not upset by the volume and the intensity. These are people who are used to running up here. So you may notice this in people or maybe even your own relationship. You can have terrible knockdown, drag out fights and feel relatively okay with each other the next day. There's no like, oh my gosh, what was that? It's like, well, when we fight, this is how we fight. And then if you have two submarines, this may look more like two avoidant people. So in couples where I have two low arousal people, they have a hard time responding to problems in a timely manner. So there tends to be this big backlog of issues they haven't gotten to. In a coupleship where there's like a submarine and an airplane, the issues they haven't got to will really bug the airplane, and the submarine is always going to feel nagged. With two submarines, that will more manifest in kind of the chaos that they swim in. And they're not necessarily getting after each other for that. But they do note that they have a really difficult time tackling problems and issues together. So that's a brief description of the different combinations you can have. And of course, there's different degrees. This is not a giant issue for every single couple. A lot of the couples I work with, it is, and it's not a very hard one to address. So let's talk about some principles behind addressing these energy level differences. So first is recognizing if there is a difference and working as hard as you can to depathologize any difference. One of my addict clients brought his wife in a while ago, and I often do that. Tell them to bring their spouse in so they can get to know me, and I can answer any questions they have. And his spouse said, I know he's really addicted to pornography. Do you want to know why? And I said, sure. And she gave me a list of reasons, and most of them, were really spot on. And one of them, she said, he spends all his energy on porn and he doesn't have energy for anything else. And I looked at him and I said, is that true? And he said, I haven't used porn in like 3 years. And I tend to believe him, and she believed him too. But she said, this is how I know he's not in recovery. Like, his energy still goes somewhere else. And he says, the only place I've been able to be a high energy person is power sports, snowmobiles, side-by-sides, jet skis. Like, that's where I can be a high energy person. Everywhere else, I just kind of feel, and I've assessed him. He's not depressed. He's not sad. He's not down. He's just not a high energy individual. And her big hope was, or she said to him, I'll know that you're in recovery when you have, energy levels that feel better to me. And I said, I'm really, really sorry to rain on your parade. But this doesn't seem to be, to me, to be one of those things that falls under, what's going to happen for him in recovery. Do you want to work on this right now? And she looked at me kind of like, this is a long-term thing. And what I asked them to start instituting is, when they came home together after being apart, they were okay with some touching. I said, I want you guys to hug until you can feel each other relax. I asked them about when they go to bed together, when they wake up together, and they weren't doing that together. And I said, I want you to start doing that together. Even if one of you is not falling asleep, put the other one to bed. When you wake up in the morning, find each other as fast as possible and just ask, how are you doing? What's going on in your head? She looked at him, would you do that? Yeah, I'll do that. A couple months later, he came back and he said, I can't believe how big of a difference that makes. Because what happens energetically when you make yourselves spend quality time together, not just being in each other's space, annoying each other, but really like, let's come together, you even each other out. He even noticed, he said, it's easier for me to spend time with her because she feels a little more manageable to me. Her energy, her outgoingness has always been a bit overwhelming for me. And I feel like just this, like at transition points, just this syncing up with each other, getting on the same page physically. He said, she's not as overwhelming to me anymore. And it's not that her energy level changed or his changed. They just come together more often, and they feel that rebalancing. So the first principle would be, notice the differences and don't pathologize them. Really look at just, how are you wired? How were you as a kid? What differences do we have here? The second is, start focusing on transition times together. So how you say hello, how you say goodbye, how you say goodnight, how you say good morning. Those are all key times where folks with arousal differences have a hard time. Taking this out of the relationship, imagine like going to your office and that one really annoying person who doesn't need any coffee and is like, has sunshine shooting out of every pore of their body at like 8 a.m. and you want to strangle them. They come bouncing into your office and have all sorts of energy. Even how you greet that kind of person. Oh, hey, how you doing? And as you do that on the run, instead of getting cornered in your office or your workspace, that can help with some of the balancing out. I did mention touch before. With all of this co-regulation stuff, touch is the most efficient way to do it. However, I'll put an asterisk there. I know for many of you in your relationships, touch is a no-go right now, or there's a lot of triggers around it. And that's perfectly okay. Just because touch is most efficient does not mean it's the only way to get to balancing out and kind of reaching a co-regulatory state together. If that is something that there is some openness to and some ability for, it can be really important to talk with your partner through how you're going to use touch to sync up together. We'll hold hands when we talk. We'll hug and kiss hello, that kind of stuff. If touch is not on the table, you might want to look at what your time together is like. Picking an activity, a physical activity that is neither too high or too low. For airplane people, stuff like yoga and meditation is terrible. Stresses them out. It's too boring, too slow. Submarine folks, they can have a really hard time with like high energy, high impact sport and exercise because it's too much arousal, too much energetic shift. So things like taking a walk together, Things like a face-to-face, eye-to-eye brief check-in. Tell me about your day. What are you looking forward to tonight? What's going on in your life? Even practicing being in the same room together without necessarily having to interact or without annoying each other. This is something my spouse and I will do on occasion. Right now we're stuck in really good TV, and that's what we do to wind down at night. Sometimes we'll read in the same room, whether that's the bedroom, the living room, but just being in that space, being able to hear each other's breathing, the rhythm of the page turns, that kind of stuff. So proximity, intentional proximity helps a lot with balancing out. And as with all things that I share here, there is not one best path forward. So the last principle I leave you with is experiment. As you know the differences, as you know your partner, as you let your partner get to know you, experiment with what works for the two of you. And the definition of what works is you both leave feeling like you got what you need. That was good for both of you. So I guess to sum up, energetic level differences, differences and biases, they can sink a relationship just as significantly as big issues like betrayal. So keep an eye out for them. Greet it with some flexibility, some curiosity, and see what differences you can make in your life and in your relationships by keeping this in mind, that energy level differences make a difference.
Thank you, John. I can always tell when the subject matter is new because we don't get any question. Everybody's very busy listening and learning. So we have no questions right now, but I have some. Type some questions into the Q&A feature. I know I seem like I'm high energy and an extrovert, but I'm actually a submarine and an introvert. But I get it together for this. I love what when you talked about temperament, which is sort of the precursor to personality style and alertness and energy level. I mean, I have two cats and they're total opposites. One of them is reactive. One of them is incredibly non-reactive. The reactive one is an introvert, and the non-reactive one is an extrovert, just like you said. So this applies to more than just people. Is there a link can you explain the link between temperament and later life personality style, particularly attachment styles, and how that impacts relationships as well?
Yeah. So the link. So if you look at it this way, the only thing a baby has when they come out of the womb is their neurological wiring. They don't have experience. They don't have expectations. Like they pretty much just have their wiring and what the experience was in utero. And you know, the details of what that subjective experience is actually like for the kid in utero are such a mystery, and we can't even go there yet, that you just have to look at it as this is the way that you're wired together. So if you look at things like if somebody is more on the reactive side as an infant, as they grow up, they're going to grow up protecting that reactivity. It's like, you know, having an exposed root on your tooth or like some enamel that's missing. You may avoid cold food altogether, or you may avoid cold food on that part of your mouth. You may brush your teeth differently. So personality is it's an ongoing set of behaviors that are a pattern. And that pattern forms around a lot of different things. It forms around what you see, what you are taught by parents and other caregivers. It also forms around your subjective experience. You'll see this a lot with like kids on the autism spectrum. They're certainly not all a monolith, and you know, not all autistic people are the same, but there are some really similar personality traits. The aversion with like eye contact, that can look like avoidant attachment. It's also eye contact is like one of the most stimulating things that human beings do with each other. So over time, these different behaviors, whether it's learned or something that protects a neurological sensitivity in you, over time, these behaviors start to make a pattern, and that's where personality comes from. So it's not always a one-to-one correlation, but your neurological start point, how you came out of the womb, is going to influence greatly which personality traits you adopt and go with. It's one of the reasons why we'll see, like, I've heard this from clients I've worked with who were adopted as infants. When they meet their birth families, or as they grow up, they'll be struck by how similar they are to their birth parents in personality, even when they haven't had a lot of contact with them. Again, a lot of that goes back to it's DNA, it's neurological. We essentially were wired similarly enough, and we adapted the same way to that wiring.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about my friend Michael, who was adopted, and Michael is loud, and when he starts talking, you should plan to be there for a while, because it's going to continue. He's a talker, and he's a loud talker, and he was adopted into this family of quiet people, and he drove them crazy. Yeah, he had a family of submarines, and they adopted an airplane, and he drove them crazy. And then he, as an adult, he met his biological family, and he's like, oh my God, I get it. They were all, he said it was the noisiest place he'd ever been in his life. And he loved it. He loved it. But I look at, like, my sister and myself. I'm definitely a submarine. I'm very quiet. My sister is a talker, and she gave birth to 3 talkers, and they're loud. And I visit her sometimes. And after a dinner, if all 3 kids are there with their partners who are also, it's just, I just want to go into my room and shut the door and have silence for about 6 hours, because it's too much for me. And I can't imagine, like, I live alone, so if I had an airplane here all the time, it would drive me bananas. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so I do have a question, and it has nothing to do with that. That was just an observation. For addicts, is there a more common type? Are addicts commonly airplanes or submarines, or it doesn't really matter?
If you were to tell me which type of addict, like, I think when I see, like, someone who pretty much exclusively uses porn, they tend to be a little more submarine type, because there's more of that, like, avoidance shell. Folks who are more what I would call, like, classic sex addiction, I think they tend to be a little more high arousal. That being said, of course, I'll contradict what I just said. Sometimes our addiction serves to counteract our neurological state. So you can have submarines who feel alive when they're doing intense things. It's not all, humans are really complicated, and we don't all use the same behavior for the same thing. So I think addiction is an equal opportunity employer when it comes to arousal styles.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's jump into the Q&A. Thank you, Jon. That was very interesting. Yes, it was. I'd love to talk to you more about the transition and how to make those helpful. This was actually a question I have too. Transitions. You kind of said, from go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time. What other transitions are there in the day besides hello, goodbye, or awake, asleep?
Yeah. First I would go back to realize what's at stake in a transition. Go all the way back to when you were teeny tiny. So last night, this was the highlight of my life. For the last little while. I walk in the door after work, and my 9-month-old daughter is sitting on her rocking unicorn. And once she figures out it's me, she starts, she's dancing and she's squawking, and she's really, like, she was excited to see me. It wasn't just somebody came in the room. The way we experience transitions as a child, we don't have what's called object permanence, meaning when you're out of sight, I know you're still there. That's why peekaboo is hilarious for kids at a certain age, because it's like, whoa, you just popped out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting that. So when we are left, or when we go away at a young age, that's really, really distressing. Before you have object permanence, your brain is saying, will I ever see this person again? That's why separations at younger ages, and even into older ages, they can be really distressing. So that's what's at stake with transitions. Now, I got a good transition last night. There's going to be times, I'm sure, my older kids have done this to me when they were younger, that they're mad at me for leaving. And when I come back, they realize, oh, you were gone and I was so mad. And the reunion is not happy. It's actually a stressful reunion. I'm a big believer that we don't ever grow out of what happens for us as an infant. It just gets more complex. But the baseline there is transitions are hard because they have to do with saying goodbye. They have to do with being alone. So, the main transition times, coming home after you've been apart, waking, going to sleep. You can look at transitions on a larger scale, like how you take vacations together. I've learned that I need a day of lead time and lag time after we travel. Because if I go straight from working and into that mode, and then I try to like turn around in vacation mode in one day, my family questions whether or not they want to spend time cooped up with me in vacation space, because I'm awful. I'm too stressed. If I give myself that transition day in between and I shift out of like work and stress mode and into like, all right, I'm going to be a human being and be with people mode, it works much better. And that transition, for me, it takes a good day, half a day to make that happen. That's something that my spouse and I, we have kind of formalized. That's built into our procedure. So when I plan time off, I plan 2 extra days, one before and one after. Because if I don't give myself, again, the transition day, if we don't give ourselves the transition day to get back in real life, it feels like being smacked in the face and we're all cranky the day we come home from the vacation. You can also look at transitions with the family, like if you have children in the home, transitioning from parent mode into coupleship mode. How do you do that? Do you do that in a way that helps both of you? Does one of you, kind of stand by until the other one battens down the hatches with the kids, and then you're looking at each other, okay, what do we do? Or do you transition them together and you transition into your space together? They happen all over the place. And the important thing is to, the question says, how do you make those more helpful? Get a ritual around it, get intentional about it. Don't just let it happen, especially if there's specific difficulties. I know every time my spouse travels without me, I'm about 10 times more anxious than I am normally. That's a tough transition. I don't want her to not travel, and she doesn't want to not travel. But we have rituals around check-in. We talk every night before bed. We text more throughout the day when we're apart like that, to help ease some of the stress, some of the burden of being apart.
Yeah, I like the suggestion you gave somebody, hug until you both relax. I mean, I that's awesome. I mean, I kind of do that with my cats when I come home. One of them greets me and I pet him, and the other one is laying on the floor on her back with her paws in the air because she wants me to. And that's the ritual, and it is like grounded. I'm home. I think they're probably like little kids. They don't know I'm coming back, even though I'm just out watering the plants and they watch me do it, but they still think I'm gone forever. I don't know, but one of us is frozen. Is that me or you? You're there. You're
Yeah.
there.
I was just sitting very still.
Very, very still. It freaked me out. Don't do that to me. Move a little bit. But hugging until you relax, going to bed together, waking up together, having the check-ins. I love all of these, but let's say, I grew up in a house. My dad went to bed at like 9 every night, and my mother went to bed at 1 a.m. And the wake up times were that different. I mean, and that continued until, my father passed away. How can a couple like that, who they really are just on completely different schedules, how can they deal with that?
You can put each other to bed. So it doesn't have to be we fall asleep at the same time. This happens every now and then. Generally, my spouse and I are on the same schedule, but every now and then I get, this late night bug and I want to do something. I want to go to sleep, or she does. And we don't want to disturb the other one, with lights on and movement and stuff. So we literally put each other to bed. I tuck you in, I talk with you. Sometimes there's talking, sometimes there's cuddling. Sometimes, we'll stay with each other until the other one's asleep, and then we excuse ourselves, or we'll say, all right, I'm going to go and, watch my movie now, or whatever that is. All right, thank you. But again, it's this transition. Instead of this hard cutoff, now we're together no more. There's kind of this gentle send off.
Okay.
And same thing in the morning. If you wake up at different times, there's times where, I'll sleep in and my, wife is off doing things, and I'll text immediately when I wake up, and we have a quick phone call. Or, if she knows about the time I wake up, she'll text me, how did you sleep? It doesn't have to, these rituals don't have to take a very long time.
Right. Okay. Just a connection to acknowledge that we're transitioning.
Yep.
Yeah. From being both awake to one of us awake or something. I like that. I think that's very helpful. Thank you. Can you be a submarine and have ADHD? And what does that mean for a couple whose partner is the opposite? So can you be a submarine with ADHD?
Sure, you can have all sorts of combinations here, because there is not one common ancestor, so to speak. These things don't come from the same place. So of course you can have that. And what it means for the couple when there's opposite, at the very least, it means you guys have to work hard to learn about each other, because your partner will not make intuitive sense to you. There are some people in this world, their energy level, this is bad of me to judge, but I assume that they're on like crack all the time, because their energy level, and that's just who they are. And if I read into that, like, oh, they do this because they're nervous, or they do this because, they're hiding this or that, it bugs the crap out of me. If I can just look at it, if I can find the, genuine person there, it tends to bother me less, because I understand it. Oh, you're one of those people who needs a little more, you're up here a little bit more. I don't get it intuitively, but I can get enough of a conscious understanding that I can be more effective with that person. So at the minimum, that's what it means for your relationship, is you got some more learning to do about each other.
Yeah. Okay, next one. My sex addict husband is in recovery. He's a submarine. I am an airplane. Can you address how this could affect my perception of how he's approaching his recovery? I think that's a great question.
That is
can you address how this could affect my perception of how he's approaching his recovery? And I love that you use the word perception.
Yeah. Because that's really all you have, right? Nobody has an objective reality. We all just have our perceptions, but that is what we have to deal with, is what we're perceiving. So if your spouse is a submarine, you might mistake their slow movement for a lack of dedication. You might mistake their slow processing for avoidance. I'm not saying it's not those things. I'm also saying that it may be something else. You may also, I tend to get very airplaney when I'm working on stuff that stresses me out, and my kids are at an age where they want to help with like everything. We broke up a concrete pad in our backyard last weekend with a sledgehammer, and they wanted to talk about every whack. They take a whack and what cracks did we get? And I'm sitting there like, it's taking forever. And, I had to keep reminding myself that this is not them trying not to do the work. Actually, they're really excited about doing the work. This is them, this is the first time they've ever seen something like this. So you can really read motive into outcome. And it's a very human thing to do, but they are not the same thing. Motive and outcome are not the same thing. I will say that you can't fall back on your motive when your outcome is poor and say that that should count because what I meant to do was this. But so with stuff like this, you have to be willing, at least on the first step, to slow down a bit to that pace, ask questions at that pace, get responses at that pace. I'm not saying do that forever and it's your job forever, but if you really want to crack into that world, it helps if you make the first move. And then once you start to understand maybe the inner workings a little more, what's going on, when you're seeing something that's confusing you, you calibrate. Oh, so you mentioned, you told me a little earlier that you you tend to feel a little more methodical, a little more, I have to chew every bite here. Is that what you're doing right now? Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. Okay, I just want you to know it looks like you could care less, or you couldn't care less. So I just want to calibrate, is that what's going on? No, I do care. I'm doing my methodical thing. And it's okay if it drives you crazy. You might have to talk to your marriage therapist about that. Because again, a good relationship is not about just understanding your partner and going hands off and saying, I guess I have to be fine with it. It's about understanding where the differences come from and working together on how you're going to address those effectively.
Yeah. I think back to your sloth in Utopia. If you haven't seen that movie, it's kind of funny, people. So, he's with it. He's there. He's doing the work. He's just doing it on his time frame. But he's still working. His brain is functioning and things are happening up there. It's just the physical action of getting something done is a different time frame. And I would just add, as somebody who's normally a submarine, I think we all probably fluctuate a little bit. It doesn't mean my brain is not going even, it's often going 1,000,000 miles an hour, even if I'm technically sitting on the couch and watching TV. It never stops. Is that normal, or am I weird? I'm wondering if submarines still have the spinny brains, because I have a spinny brain. It spins.
Yeah. Again, what you see on the outside is not always an indication of what's going on the inside. It's just, it's the way I run my machinery. So, I mean, the bottom line is you can't just rest on your assumptions. You really have to check them out, and you have to work to figure out what actually is going on here. And just what your spouse says about it is not the full answer. What you think about it is not the full answer. What I say about it is not the full answer. There are so many angles to go at here. And, an exercise that can be helpful if you have this, like this energy level difference in mind, observe your spouse through the lens of maybe they're an airplane and watch to see what fits. Or, maybe I'm going to assume you're a submarine, and let me see how that explains some of what I'm seeing here. And, you see what fits, and you check out your assumptions over and over again, because you'll always have incorrect assumptions if you're not the person doing it. So you always have to check that out.
Okay. I'm reading ahead here. So I'm going to read the addition to the question first. So background for the question we're about to hear: the husband is something that is mostly a submarine, the wife is mostly an airplane, and the child is an airplane. Okay, so the question is, could you possibly talk more about the eye contact thing? Our son struggles with eye, and I don't know, the age is not here. But our son struggles with eye contact even when we're having close moments, and he has fit the definition of anxiously attached since birth and has continued that way. I'm having a hard time with that because I've always tried to be responsive. I lie with him when he goes to sleep, etc. In terms of eye contact, I've always felt guilty that I used to watch TV when I breastfed him because he was up all night all the time. Now I have questions around whether my husband's hidden sex addiction and intimacy issues have impacted our son. We're both noticing our son's avoidance of eye contact. Are you saying we don't have to worry so much about that? Is there a way to help him, et cetera, et cetera? So there's a lot packed into that.
Yeah. So let me start with I'm wondering if, my husband or, my behavior has impacted him. Of course it has. Can you find out exactly how it's impacted him and how at fault you are? Maybe. Is that useful? Probably not. I think it's really important if you want a, secure, functioning, close connected relationship, you take the person as they are now. Not meaning nothing needs to change or we don't work on things, but I meet you where you are at now. And the why you got this way is a lot less important than the what are we going to do about this? So the next part of the question, are you saying you don't have to worry so much about it? I hope you don't worry about it in the way that, maybe we broke him, because that's one of like a million explanations. And if there's something that really sticks out like a sore thumb and say, I know this contributed, work on it. The beautiful thing about parent-child relationships is we're both growing up at the same time. And, we're both changing. So if there's something you can really identify that I know this hurts my kid, or I know this hurt my kid, work on it, change it. And in an age appropriate way, talk to your child about the changes you're making and why. And then how do you help him? With that question, I go to like, help him with what? When I said in the beginning, this is not pathological the way we're talking about it here. We're not saying there's a problem that needs to be fixed. We're saying there's a reality here. He might struggle like socially if he has a hard time with the eye contact thing. He might struggle, with future romantic partners unless you equip him with an understanding of what's going on for him. So being able to say things like, hey, I noticed you look away a lot when we're having close moments. Do you know what you're feeling when that happens? Drawing your child's attention back to their experience can, number one, it can help them feel normalized in what they're doing. I used to be very avoidant in eye contact. And I used to think that I had no confidence and I had no skill, and that's what the no eye contact thing meant. Until I learned about like what an anxious individual is like, until I learned about what introversion was like. And then all of a sudden my experience with eye contact meant something different. And that really helped. That really helped me to, I guess you could say, normalize, feel comfortable in my own skin. So if you're going to ask, how can we help him? I would say, how can we help him understand himself? And you do just that. Talk about what you're learning. Get curious about what's going on inside of them. You don't have to set a stopwatch and say, all right, we did 3.5 minutes of eye contact before. Let's see if we can do 3 minutes and 45 minutes of contact. There's all sorts of reasons why kids don't do eye contact at different developmental stages and different things. So if you see it as a problem to fix, you'll probably miss the tree for the forest. So really, hold it loosely, meaning don't get married to one explanation or think you have to fix it. Stay curious and help your kid get curious about it too. And you'll learn a whole lot more about them than you will if you're trying to fix it.
Yeah. There's a comment in the chat feature, teens never make eye contact because they don't want to. And then in the Q&A, it's follow up, the child is 4. So yeah, different developmental stages for sure.
Gaze aversion too. You can see this in brand new infants. It's kind of a joke at my house. Like the baby will look at anyone who's not holding them. It's because eye contact at a close proximity, like I said, it's very arousing. We have to develop, just like spicy food or, fizzy drinks, you kind of have to develop a tolerance level. So a child's ability to gaze avert, that's actually part of how they develop their sense of self. Yeah. It's essentially them saying no to this degree, like, all right, I'm ready to check out, or I'm ready to come back to myself. The theory is kids whose gaze is followed and they're not allowed to avert, they can really have a collapse of self, because essentially their no is being challenged over and over again. So again, just getting curious. Hey, does it get uncomfortable for you when we look you in the eye? The kid says yes. Okay, tell me about that if you want to. That's okay. That happens to me too. Yeah, the key there is stay curious.
Yeah, and some kids just stare at you forever. I mean, because they're comfortable with it. It makes you uncomfortable. So yeah, I think we should maybe make it clear. Mentioned anxious attachment style. There's anxious, there's avoidant, there's anxious avoidant. These are not, although they tend to, our attachment styles tend to develop early and carry through our life. We can also develop what we call earned secure attachment. And can you explain a little bit about that just real quick?
Yeah, so again, this comes from the idea, I think it's helpful not to just go down the rabbit hole of attachment styles come from something wrong that happened. An anxious avoidant attachment style is not necessarily a sign that there's some disaster that has to be fixed. Secure attachment is the ability to be I guess I would say like nimble and totally responsive to what's in front of you. So essentially secure attachment is, there's a lot of choices on the table for me here. In an anxious or anxious avoidant attachment style, there's less and less choices. So, for me, I look at myself, I'm way more on the anxious avoidant side than I am anything. That's always going to be my start line, is the way I look at it. Sometimes it feels just right to stay there. Other times I want more out of what's going on, or I want something different about what's going on. And so I can enact skills and perspectives. I can, calm and regulate myself. I can ask questions. Like, I can move to a place where my body is okay being connected. There's options in front of me. So to me, that's what secure attachment, earned security means, is I may start anywhere on the spectrum, but I can move myself into something that's more functional for the circumstances if I choose.
Yeah. Okay, next one here. I have a question about bedtimes. I have submarine characteristics, and my wife often wants to have emotionally connected conversations while we're lying in bed next to each other. I find it really hard to have those conversations as I get tired really quickly. Is there a good way to handle those situations? Is that an energy balance difference?
Yeah, it totally could be. I would say here, if you know that your partner's more of an airplane, use that to your bargaining advantage. Find your highest energy time of day and say, this is when I can do the best at this. Anytime you say no to your partner, especially around stuff like this, anytime you say no without offering an alternative, they're going to feel very rejected, because they are. So saying, hey, sweetie, I love you to death. I love the idea of us connecting. I do not have the energy level that you need at night to do it. But at 4:30 in the afternoon, when I come home from work, or, I'm a morning person, you are too. I mean, for my spouse and I, our best connecting time is our morning hikes with the dogs. We've got the, co-regulation walking going. We've got time to ourselves, and we're both pretty clear and energetic in the morning. Our nighttime, it may look like we don't like each other or talk a lot because we're both very low energy at night. So you might want a time and kind of know when you have the best to offer, and offer that. See what your spouse thinks about it, because they may be squeezing it in at the end of the day because they're afraid to intrude on something in the middle. They may be squeezing it in at the end of the day because they feel like that's the only time they have your attention. So you guys are in charge of when you talk. You can figure out how to set that up in the best way for both of you.
Yeah. And we see this a lot with couples who, are in disagreement a lot. Therapists will implement, some kind of a respectful conflict agreement. And it might say, no fighting before breakfast, no fighting in front of the kids or in public, no fighting after 10 p.m. because, we need to go to bed. You set some boundaries, that, no name calling, no throwing things. You could set a bunch of boundaries. I would think like an emotionally connective conversation might need some of the same kind of boundaries,
Yeah, I know for me, I don't like talking about that stuff in the car, either when I'm driving or I'm the passenger, because either I can't pay attention to my partner, or my partner can't pay attention to me. So we have an agreement that we don't talk about serious stuff in the car, not because it necessarily leads to fights, but we both feel really unsatisfied about it. So it's not just about avoiding conflict. You can also use these agreements to really structure getting at the best of what both of you have to offer.
Yeah, and one of the other things, scheduling check-ins. This is an obvious transition time here. Maybe we schedule our check-in before the obvious transition time, and then maybe we create a ritual for the transition time. So kind of two questions in that. What is a good couples check-in? Because we've had that come up several times today. So how do couples go about that in a healthy way? And then what would be a good transition for this couple, maybe?
The principle that I see behind good check-in is you have to give each other the information that they can't readily get at. So what are you feeling? What are you thinking? you may think at times that you're really good at seeing that. You're probably wrong a lot of the time. So you need to make that overt. I think, depending on where the relationship status is at, sharing appreciations about each other, things you notice about each other. So again, it's not apparent to me how you hold me in your heart. You have to show me that. If there are safety issues like around relapse, I think a good check-in includes, are there any changes to your sobriety status?
Right.
How are you working your program? Again, it's that stuff that I wouldn't know unless you told me. And then for this couple, a good bedtime routine, I would say here, I really want to know from your spouse, how anxious are they when they get in bed, and does the talking regulate them? Because you can get at the calming and the regulating in so many different ways. This might be a situation where some cuddling, some listening to music, some light conversation, stuff that doesn't matter so much. Hey, did you see this with the kids today? Or what did you think about the game last night? That can be just as helpful. But I would echo Scott's idea there that if there's serious, important conversations that need to happen, do those when you're both able to finish them well and nobody's going to feel dropped off.
Yeah, and 9 times out of 10, I think, and you'll correct me, John, if I'm wrong, but when couples are really fighting and not resolving it, it's because one of them is trying to check out of the conversation. Now, whether it's because they're low energy or they just don't want to have the conversation, or it's too painful for them, the exacerbating factor is, I'm not being heard.
Mm-hmm.
You're not hearing me. I mean, any thoughts on that and how to get through that, particularly in transition times?
Yeah, so this actually gets into another topic that maybe we should cover another time. But the task, the goal of having these kind of big conversations is not to exchange information, actually, and a lot of couples get off on what the goal is. The goal is to stay together. And I'm not talking stay married. I'm talking about being able to continue a constructive conversation. So actually what is often more required than speaking clearly is being able to regulate your partner when they get upset, or being able to regulate yourself when you're upset. There is no issue. Sorry, this is an extreme statement. There are very few issues that are so pressing that it's a good idea to risk your bond to get it solved right now. In other words, if this is a 6-part conversation, because we can do 10-minute chunks before it gets really, really scary, stop every 10 minutes and reaffirm your friendship, reaffirm your commitment to figure this out together. Do something that's low demand and calming, because you have to stay in the foxhole together. Otherwise, nobody's watching your back and bad things can happen. Too often we get into arguments and we shoot the person in the foxhole because they're bugging us, rather than staying focused on the task. We both got to be alert about the threats that are coming in here and helping each other with that.
Yeah. Thank you. We're out of time. Really, really cool topic. And we probably should explore that bit that we just hit at the end. But yeah, great topic. Thank you, John. Anything you want to say to take us out, or?
Oh, just thanks again, as always. Great questions, and I'll be looking forward to next time.
Yeah, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Bye.
Have a great day. We'll see you soon.